Wait! I'm a what? Written by Artina Blackcharm. Chapter 15. Fee fee fo fum. Ask not whence the thunder comes, ask not where the herds have gone, nor why the birds have ceased their song. When coming home, don't take too long. Someone sat down in a newly pinched tent over in one of the alleys. The tent didn't have any holes where rain could come through, and there was even a new sheet of dry cardboard laid out on the floor. One would say it was rather a nice tent. A head poked into the tent entrance that still had a working zipper. "Oi, where's Danny?" they asked. Aiden finished setting up the lamp Danny fixed up for him a week ago. "Oh," Aiden waved a hand. "Still out by the park." The lamp looked nice next to the box with some basic toiletries. One of the kids at the fight gave them new stickers to decorate it with. "For real? Didn't the fight start 2 hours ago?" The tent was finished, and the finishing touch was one of Miss Junie's blankets. Aiden smiled, pleased at the setup, and looked up at the person who stuck their head through his tent. Yep. Danny and Valen stood across each other, across the torn-up grass and dirt, panting, trying to catch their breath. Danny's shirt and pants looked like they've been rolling around the dirt, which they had. There were some rips that were sure to upset old man LJ, and some blood stains, though not enough to cause alarm. It's the same as with the pants Valen wore, and the bandages he had wrapped around his forearms and feet. The blood was mostly due to scratches, though Valen swore that Danny had bitten him earlier at some point. They smiled at each other. "How are you still kicking?" Valen asked incredulously. He fought a lot of people. Mostly they were around his size. If they were smaller, they usually had no small amount of gadgets that pissed him off. But Danny was still literally barefoot and had no tools or weapons at his disposal during the fight. Every time Valen grabbed a hold of Danny, a small part of him was still worried with how skinny the shit felt in his hands. Except Danny took hits that would have knocked a grown man out, or at least put one of the bats out of commission for a day or two. Not that Valen wanted to hurt Danny, but he didn't want to insult the kid by half-assing the fight. Danny wasn't insulting him either. Not that he ever seemed to do something half-assed. Danny laughed at Valen's question and wiped some of the blood that seeped out from his mouth. He bit his tongue earlier while laughing at a joke one of the kiddies at the sidelines made just while Valen tackled him again. "I got lots of energy," he crept back. Then when Danny tried to move from the ground, he barely moved an inch, and instead fell on his ass before flopping back onto the ground completely. Valen snorted. "Sure you do," though he was sure that if push came to shove, Danny would have no trouble getting back up. This just wasn't the time. Valen was kind of relieved that with the steps coming towards Danny from him and Granty, the kid wasn't bothering to move. The fight had gone on for long enough, and Valen, to be honest, was ready to sleep for a couple of days. Granty came up beside him as they both reached Danny, except when Granty looked down at Danny on the ground, he laughed. Danny huffed. "I could take you and Granty," he said, waving a hand weakly at the two of them. "Don't think that I won't." In response, Granty reached down and grabbed Danny's leg, lifting him upside down. Danny, as usual, let himself hang. Some of the kids tried to hide their laughter. "Granty wins," Granty said. Danny waved his hand limply at Granty again. "Rematch, you cheater!" "You don't want to do that." Valen whispered conspiratorially to Grunty. "Little shit bites." "So do you," Danny retorted. Valen smiled and leaned in closer to Danny's face, hissing at him. A part of him was pleased with how Danny never flinched from being so close to his teeth, and when he'd occasionally let more characteristics from his namesake sweep through day to day, not everyone was so calm in the face of Killer Croc. Danny smiled at him, and his eyes flared bright for a second. Then suddenly, Valen couldn't see a thing. The little chit had jumped onto his face. Valen didn't even see the little chit slip from Grunty's hold. Grunty roared with laughter as Danny scrambled over Valen's head and onto his back while he tried to grab his foot. It was literally like trying to grab a slippery fish. When Valen managed to grab a hold of something, he pulled. But then Valen felt as the waistband of his pants were being pulled too. Danny crackled at his back. "Oi, let go!" Valen yelled while particularly laughing. He couldn't help it. It was just so ridiculous. "You're fighting dirty!" He tugged more, but all it just showed was that Danny had yet to let go of his damn pants. "No rules in a," Danny replied, except the last word wobbled out like wind and static. Suddenly Valen could feel an almost instant tug, and a hand brushed past the base of his tail. Valen twisted and turned, trying to get a better grip on Danny, who kept trying to climb him. At one point, Danny was clinging to him, completely upside down on his back. One of his legs weirdly hooked onto his shoulder while the other was still in Valen's grip. He was still pulling, and it was only a second that when Valen pulled, the tug on his waistband wasn't as strong. With the little open window, Valen buckled up quickly, smiling at the squeak Danny let out at the motion. Then with that, Valen twisted his body in a quick turn, letting his tail go with the momentum. The grunt Danny let out when it hit him in his gut and went airborne in Grunty's direction made Valen feel ready to bite through steel. And Grunty hit the dirt with a large thud and grunt. But it was overshadowed by the laughter from Danny, who was sprawled out on top of Grunty. The laughter died out with a sigh, but Danny made no move to get off, and Grunty stayed still with Danny on top of him. Valen stepped forward and looked down at the two of them. When he let out a breath, it was a deep rumble. Grunty turned his head towards him. "Good fight?" Grunty asked with a smile. Valen nudged Grunty's arm and then Danny's too, who just weakly squatted his foot away. "Definitely," Danny answered before sighing and just looking up at the sky. He still looked like he just got out of a fight and was a complete mess, but lying on Grunty and looking up, he looked utterly at peace, completely calm and content. It made Valen feel. There was a small tug on his pants. Eric looked up at him with a smile. "Mr. Jones, you gotta show us some moves," he said, urgently, followed by a murmur of agreement behind him from the other little kiddos who stuck around. There were barely any adults left, most of them leaving a while ago, but the children had been able to stay the whole time to watch the fight, and now they kept staring at Valen with eager eyes. Grunty and Danny didn't look like they were gonna move anytime soon, so Valen made his decision. Why not? All right. Following his ends were more tugs on Valen's pants, and one on his hands as the children pulled him to the side with endless questions. Meanwhile, Grunty looked up at the sky. It was the same as another time. Grunty looked up. The dirt was slightly cool, while Saturday was a bit warm from the fight. He had yet to move, but he was okay. Grunty could tell. Saturday was happy from fighting Valen. It looked like a fun fight. Grunty could hear the little ones asking Valen questions on how to fight. Valen was a good fighter. It was nice to just lay there. Usually when Grunty was lying down, it was because he was close to changing again. Death would creep closer, but this wasn't that. Little Death was lying on top of him, while Valen was showing the little ones how to throw someone off and punch. Most of them already knew how to do it, but Valen told them about other moves, how to fight dirty, he said. He even told the little ones to bite if they need to. Some of them said they already did, much to Valen's approval. And don't let them take your knees, Saturday suddenly yelled out. What about my organs? A little one yelled back. Not those either. With that, Saturday sighed and Grundy chuckled. He never worried about people taking his knees. It's a valid worry, Saturday said, lightly petting Grundy with the back of his hand. It was nice how he always knew what Grundy meant. Grundy didn't need a lot of words with Saturday, so it was enough just to poke Saturday back as a response. Joe liked to walk early in the morning before things got going, and when it was quiet. He liked the silence. Usually noise meant trouble, and he had more than his fair share of trouble throughout his life. The sun was barely creeping up when he walked up the steps of the observatory. It felt a little different, considering that before it was a place to break into to rest for a while until it got locked up again. Once or twice the cops even came to haul them out, but it changed a few months ago and the doors had yet to be locked again, probably because Danny claimed the place. That much was clear from the constellation that drew your eyes up. It was interesting how different it felt to walk into the observatory now than before. Joe wouldn't have imagined he'd feel so at ease walking into a space, especially one he'd been dragged out of a few times. When he opened the door, there was a soft jazz, and Joe recognized it being from one of the radio stations he liked to listen to on Tuesday nights. He followed the sound to the side area, where most of the time people hung out. An old sitting room that didn't have any chairs. However, someone mentioned seeing Danny looking at some old wooden chairs someone put outside an apartment. Danny was a sort of fixer. Before the observatory, he had fixed a lot of people's things in the neighborhood, and he still does. Joe's radio was one of them, and by the sound of it, it was working perfectly now, except it wasn't Danny who was changing the volume on the radio, but Solomon Grundy sitting beside him. His large fingers were almost comical in the way they slowly turned the small knob on the front of the old radio. "Oh, hey, Joe," Danny said, not looking up from what looked like some other device someone asked if he could fix. It looked like an old wind-up flashlight. Grundy looked up at Joe and just grunted before turning back to the radio. He changed it to another station that tended to play old love songs. Grundy raised the volume just a bit before retracting his fingers and turning to watch Danny. Meanwhile, Danny continued to fiddle with the flashlight and started to bob his head to the music. It reminded Joe of what he heard from the kids, and one of the adults who had seen the fight Danny had with Waylon, or Mr. Jones, as the kids called him. The fight had been good fun, and Danny seemed to like it. It was nothing like the other scuffles they had seen Danny get into, with some thugs passing through. It was a friendly fight, though, and it looked like Danny was buddy-buddy with Solomon Grundy, too. Apparently, after fighting Waylon for almost 3 hours, Danny spent almost 2 just lying on top of Grundy, looking at the sky. At one point, Jimmy said that Bright Eyes was telling Grundy about constellations and how the sun was created. Not once did Grundy move until the kids were trying to drag Danny off of him in an attempt to make him stop rambling. Someone said it had turned into a tug of war at some point between the kids and Grundy. No one would say who won. Joe had seen Grundy in action before, a few years back. It had been a vicious fight that only came to an end when Batman and Robin showed up. He remembered the way Grundy roared and how easily he could punch a hole through a wall and pick up a car. He was a force to be reckoned with, and one of the rogues that everyone agreed would be best to just avoid if you came across him. Everyone said he tended to be on the ground most of the time anyway, except there he was with Joe's radio. It wasn't even the first time that Grunty had been in the observatory either. From what Beth told him, Grunty wasn't just hiding on the ground anymore. People had been seeing him up top more now. He was never causing trouble though. Usually he was just watching or looking at something. Once or twice Joe had seen one of the kids following behind, sort of like Valen after the observatory incident. "Oh, do you want to join a card game?" Danny asked, holding up a deck of cards with stars on them. It looked like he finished working on the flashlight, considering Grunty was winding it up just fine. Danny rolled his eyes when the beam of light was directed to his face. "Maybe you can beat Grunty. He cheats." "Grunty is better cheated than Saturday," Grunty said, smiling, and put the flashlight to the side. Danny just smiled ruefully before splitting the deck, though he waited to see if Joe wanted to play. Joe looked back at Grunty, who was already smiling at Danny. They were all sitting on the floor, and the radio was playing another love song. He nodded. Not even a few minutes later, Joe learned that while Danny was good in a fight, he was really bad at playing cards. Also, Grunty had the perfect poker face. Grunty liked the underground. He liked the dark and the tunnels. He liked what he found in them. It was where he first found Valen. It was where he first found Little Death. It was where he found his friends. Grunty thought he found friends in the past, people who promised they were friends, that they would do things together. And they would. But then something would happen, and they would leave Grunty alone. They would leave when he changed, when he died. Some of them had been the reason he died. He didn't like those friends. But he liked Valen and Little Death. He liked how Valen and Little Death liked each other. Not at all surprised to meet each other, and were more than happy to talk with Grunty still there. They didn't forget him. Grunty liked how Little Death let him call him Saturday. Solomon Grunty died on a Saturday, and so did his friend. His friend had told him so they first met. A date they shared together. Grunty already had his name, and he liked it very much, even if it was different. Little Death had a different name too, but was more than happy to accept the name Grunty gave him, Saturday. Saturday smiled and laughed with Grunty. He brought cards and was bad at cheating. Saturday visited and spoke to Grunty. When things felt like death and cold, Saturday had been beside him. He listened to Grunty's story, to when Grunty wasn't called Grunty. Then he told his own story, and Grunty listened. Grunty felt better that day. He understood more, felt more at ease, happy. It didn't bother him to go outside of the underground. Grunty felt okay, especially when he noticed that this was Saturday's space. This was his, and he wanted Grunty to be there. Saturday smiled so widely when Grunty came to watch the fight between his friends. And the little ones that Grunty could tell were Saturday's let him be there. They played and laughed when he was nearby. Saturday did not tell them to keep away. Saturday did not tell Grunty to go away. So Grunty came out more. Saturday came to show him what he called the observatory. A place with stars and completely his friends. It felt like a home, soft and warm. It felt like Grunty's spot in the tunnels, but different because it was Saturdays. Grunty knew that it was special, that he was let in there. The people were nice too. All of them were kind to his friends and him. He could tell Saturday cared about them. They were his. So Grunty made sure that he'd take care of them too. He especially liked Joe. He knew how to cheat better than Saturday did. Just how the hell did he know it was gonna rain? Zipper asked exasperatedly from the awning they had run under with Snaps. The street was already hard to see with the smoke coming from a nearby building fire, but the rain didn't help at all. Snaps stared at them as she took out an old umbrella. He's a weirdo, Zipper, that's why. That's your answer for anything the boss does, Zipper answered. Snaps rolled her eyes. She didn't have time to argue with Zipper. The two of them had gone out for a reason after all. She didn't like to waste time, and it was already 2 days past when she was supposed to meet her contact, Jess. Snaps, she just might not show up, Zipper said, and Snaps tried to ignore how illogical what they said was. Jess didn't live in the neighborhood. She jumped from different foster homes and run away more times than Snaps ever did. It was more than likely that something happened. Shit was happening all around Gotham too. For the past few days, that fire they passed was just an example of one of them. Snaps had info that there were attacks on members of the Bats, and some bombs around the city had exploded. Some of them was even in the hospital where Snaps had just visited her sister a week ago. There were whispers of kidnappings. One of them was from the hospital in the same ward her sister had been in. If anyone knew who was taken, it was Jess. And Snaps had been looking for her and hadn't found shit. I gotta find her, she finally told Zipper, and they didn't have to follow her. But when she walked out into the rain again, they did anyway. Hours later, they were no closer to answers, and they decided that it was time to head back. It was easy to catch a bus that ran a route near their neighborhood. I'm fucking tired, Zipper sighed, leaning back into their bus seat. They kicked up their feet onto the top of the seat in front of them before turning their head to look out the bus window. Maybe she's in hiding, they suggested, and Snaps felt like laughing at the idea that Zipper was trying to comfort her. It was unlike them. Now you're being the weirdo, she said. Hey, don't say that. Boss might think I'm just trying to steal his position, you know. Snaps slightly slapped Zipper's leg. Then shut up and don't be weird. I'm fine. She brought her feet up onto the seat and crossed them, letting her hands fall in the center. Zipper didn't say anything else, and the two of them waited for the bus stop. People got on and off. No one sat near them. It was dark outside their window. When Snaps pulled on the string for their upcoming stop, she kicked Zipper's leg. Get up. We're at our stop. Shit. Zipper sprang up. Don't fucking scare me like that, they said as they stretched their arms and groaned. I was having a nice dream to where Jimmy and Old Man LJ. Zipper bumped into Snaps, who just stopped right in front of them. But as they went to say something, they stopped. The bus driver was right in front of them, holding a club in his hands. The doors of the bus haven't even opened yet. Can I help you? Snaps asked. The bus driver smiled. You haven't paid your fare, girlie. Snaps growled. The bus they were on, the 137th, eastbound, hadn't had a working fare box in a month. Not once when she used it did the driver bother asking or checking if anyone paid anything at all, much less stop someone from getting off. Now that she had a better look at the man's uniform in front of her, something clicked. You're not a bus driver, are you? She asked. The man's smile only confirmed it. There were a few murmurs behind her from other passengers at the growing silence from her question. Slowly the voices of the passengers rose as they realized the situation. A few of them she recognized were regulars on the route. One man or two, by the sound of it, was trying to open the back door of the bus. The yelling that followed showed that his efforts hadn't worked. The whole time Snaps hadn't looked away from the bus driver, and she took a step back as the man's face twisted. His smile turned into a scowl, and when he went to unbutton his foul uniform shirt, he saw the white powder underneath on his neck like makeup, and the edges of a horrifying familiar tattoo. "Chokagoon," Zipper whispered to her from behind, and they grabbed one of her hands. A few of the yells turned into screams, and then Zipper pulled her hand. She didn't fight them. She kept a tight grip as they climbed over the bus seats and ducked down. She didn't let go when she saw someone pull out a gun. She didn't scream when shots were fired, and the Chokagoon just laughed. When the glass rained down on them, she didn't let go, and when Zipper pulled her up and towards the now broken window, she didn't let go, even when there was a sudden burst of pain on her bicep that felt like fire, and she finally cried out. She didn't let go of Zipper's hand. The two of them landed on gravel, and when they got up, they ran. Outside the bus wasn't any better. People were running around. Others like them and more Chokagoons hadn't bothered to wash off their makeup. A car exploded down the street, and a storefront was lit on fire in front of them by a Chokagoon. "Fuck," Zipper rasped out, and they turned to run. When the other goon looked their way, the laughter that followed them only made Zipper curse more. They ran until they turned a corner, and Snaps let Zipper lead the way. They were always more skilled when it came to hiding and getting out of sticky situations, whereas Snap's expertise lay with information. It was with that expertise that she knew they were fucked when a different sort of goon appeared, and had no issue grabbing a hold of them when they tried to make a run for it again, even when both Zipper and she fought back, dirtier than ever, with kicks to the ankles and fingers to the eyes. And at one point Snaps tasted blood from biting one of the men's arms. She knew they were fucked, because suddenly Zipper stopped moving, and there was a knife to their neck, the tip of it, with the thinnest bit of red. Snaps froze, while the man she bit pulled her hair up enough to make her stand on her tippy toes. "You gonna calm down now?" the man holding the knife to Zipper's neck sneered. Snaps knew a lot of things. She survived all sorts of situations because of it. She gained respect because of it. So she knew they were fucked, because there was no other thing she could say to that question other than yes.